Hmm. Well, welcome to the Ocean Studio of the Yahowah blog. I'm your host, Craig Winn. We have tried now on two prior occasions, this will be the third, to bring part three of our review of Coming Home, Qowl, AVoice. Part three now of our review of the third Mizmowr. And the prior two occasions, while slightly credible, slightly legible, slightly acceptable. The voice quality we were deriving from the microphone setup was not nearly the level that we would have liked. So I'm going to try a third time to deliver this presentation on the third Mizmowr. Because I think it's important and I don't want audio quality issues to hinder what we can learn from it. So let's try again. It begins with the revelation of Dod, inspired by Yahweh. Dod is now the declared Son of God. He is Yahweh's Messiah. He says both of those things about Dod on three occasions, which is unlike anything he has announced about anyone else prior. So we can be assured that if you want to ascribe the title Son of God or Messiah to anyone, the person it must be attributed to is Dod David. And that's a big deal since there is a religion that has become the most popular in the world that has arisen based upon replacement foolology and creating a counterfeit to bear those titles. And underneath that religious rubbish that Christianity has piled on top of the truth is the most profoundly important discovery in human history. That David is not only the Messiah, not only the Son of God, not only the returning King of the universe, not only a prophet, but he is the one who saved the covenant family, who provided salvation for Israel by volunteering to honor the sacrifices of the Moed Mikre, Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, doing so at the time that is wrongly attributed to the misnomer Jesus, and doing so at precisely the time that he predicted as Gabriel, God's most courageous and competent man, to Daniel 600 years in advance of fulfilling that prophecy in 33 CE, which was year 4000 Yah. So in what we're going to read here, what we've already covered in the first two Mizmowr, is that story of Dod volunteering to be our Savior, and of him accomplishing that mission only to be denied by his people, particularly rabbis, and namely the rabbis of Shaul Paul, of Christian infamy, and Rabbi Akiba, who is the founder of Rabbinic Judaism, who is the most disreputable figure, probably among Jews of all time. So let's begin our review. It states that Yahweh, and folks, we just have to deal with reality here. The pronunciation of Yahweh's name is exceedingly easy to derive. And there is only one accurate pronunciation of Yahweh's name. And to not state his name is to be completely disassociated from him. It is the one crime, according to the Torah, that is unforgivable. So if you're among those who gets all up in a twit over someone using Yahweh's name, then you're on the wrong side of this argument. God's really clear. Yahweh is his one and only name for all time. And that anyone who in any way discourages its use, demeans it, negates it, will never be forgiven. So I'm here to tell you that my primary mission is to reintroduce Yahweh's name to his people. And we know how to pronounce it because the transliteration of his name is conveyed by the letters which comprise, well, let's begin with Elohah. Elohah is the title God. It derives the O sound from the Hebrew Wah and the Ah sound at the conclusion of it from the Hebrew Hey. This is guided by his Torah instructions. Torah, the O sound in Torah, is derived from the Hebrew Wah, and the concluding Ah sound is derived from the Hebrew Hey. Therefore, you now know how to pronounce the the Wah and the Hey in Yahweh's name, leaving only the Yod or the Y to ascertain, and it's of course pronounced exactly as it is in Haya, which is Hey, Yod, Hey. The very verb that Yahweh said defines his name and his existence. It means to exist. And the Yah and Haya is not in dispute. Therefore, it is Yahowah. Not complicated. And if you're still tied up in a tizzy fit again over the pronunciation of the Wah, consider how the O sound is derived in Shalom. If you do your research, you'll find out that it is from the Hebrew Wah, which, by the way, is pronounced very much like it is in English, where it is a vowel consonant. There are hundreds of words where the W in English is preceded by the O sound. Howl, own, our existence, our examples, loan, as hundreds of them. And the Y sound in Hebrew is pronounced exactly as the Y is. In English, it's a legacy of the Hebrew alphabet since it was the first phonetic alphabet in the history of the world. So it is Yahweh that Dowd began writing his third Mizmowr song. So since Dowd is Yahweh's beloved, no dispute on that. Dowd is Yahweh's firstborn son, his Bakor, no dispute on that. Dowd is Yahweh's appointed and anointed Messiah, Masiach, no question about that. Dowd was the choice that Yahweh made for king of Yisrael, no question about that. It is Dowd's throne that will exist forevermore. It is Dowd that is returning on Yom Kippurim in 3,000 or 6,000 Yah. Should be no dispute on that because God's been very clear regarding all of this. And God said, listen, all of the promises I've made to Dowd are going to come true. I am not a liar, and therefore you can count on me being accurate in all of this. And yet it's Dowd who correctly stated and opened this Mizmowr with Yahweh's name. So since he knew Yahweh far better than anybody today, since he used Yahweh's name and he is called Sadak, right by Yahweh, how could it possibly be true that the rabbis saying that you cannot say his name, that it needs to be replaced by Hashem or Adonai, can be right? They can't be right if Dowd is right. Meaning, since Dowd is right, the rabbis are wrong. And you need to know it, Israel. You need to start using Yahweh's name. Yahweh, what is the extent of and why the increase in number? It is Ma Rabab. Who are the most concerning? How many are there? And what is the purpose of the mass gathering and magnitude of my adversaries in trouble, Sar, of my foes and this unfavorable situation of my enemies and would-be oppressors, of my dire straits and narrow confines, even my opponent who is lowly and little, from Sa'ar to be bound in, confined in a narrow place, besieged and tied up, vexed and harassed by those who are overtly hostile and antagonistic. A great many, Rab, the basis of rabbi, the preponderance of people, the great majority, an abundant and extensive amount, and a widespread and numerous quantity, rise up, kum, take a stand. They're established, they're even honored, they're exalted. They're also incited against me. Mizmowr, lyric to be sung, Psalm 3:1. Let's begin our analysis of this with Sar. Sar is the Hebrew word for not only trouble, it is indicative of someone who is confined and harassed, constrained. And specifically, as it relates to Dode, he was not Sar at any time in his life, not during that first life anyway. He was he faced an insurrection by his son, but it was very quickly put down. The majority of Israelites favored Dode over Absalom, and it took about 15 minutes to resolve. So this is not pertaining to his first life. It is pertaining to what transpired after his second and before his third of three lives. And what it says by using Sar is that the primary meaning of Sar isn't actually trouble. And though it's very often rendered that way, it's the time of Jacob's Sar, which we translate as Yisrael's troubles, but it actually means confinement. It speaks of being uh, diminished, to being considered and oppressed as someone of lesser stature and caliber. It speaks of even of subjugation of a people. Uh, we find Sar in the midst of Mitzrayim. It's the plural of Mitzar, and Mitzar is to ponder the implications of Sar, of being confined adversarially. Uh, so if you take Mitzrayim, at the time that realizing that Yahweh literally forcefully drug the children of Israel, kicking and screaming out of Mitzrayim, this place of religious and political confinement and oppression, and that ultimately Yahweh is returning with Dode to remove his people from the time of Jacob's Sar, this being hemmed in on all sides, constrained, diminished, adversarially attacked. We see a connection here between the beginning of the Torah story and the renewal of the Torah in our lives. And we see our place in this story and God's role in this story. So it is important to see Sar from that point of view. And and it's also important to recognize relative to Sar that Dode represents not just the Messiah, Son of God, and the King of Yisrael, not just the prophet and songwriter of Yisrael. He is Yisrael, uh, both the good and the bad. He represents uh, all of Yisrael. In fact, the name Yisrael conveys good and bad. On the positive side, it is those who engage and endure with God. On the negative side, it's those who cause strife for and contend with the Almighty. So it is a name which says there's two sides to Yisrael, pursuant to the relationship with God, just as there was a good and bad side to Dode. At times he made some horrible decisions, and at times he was the most brilliant and courageous among us. So we ought to see Dode as Israel. And also, as it relates just to the covenant, which is why Israel exists, it's why Israel is called the chosen people. They were chosen for the covenant. It is through Dode that Yahweh states emphatically in the 89th Mizmowr that he established the covenant through Dode, which means that Dode fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakorim. So in this particular case, what Dode is asking Yahweh is, how many people and what is the origins of this great um, widespread worldwide attempt to discredit me, to restrict what I represent. He represents the fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, and Bakorim. So he's the doorway to life. He is the means to perfect God's people. He is our access to the covenant family and to God's home in heaven. And this is all being negated, attacked, and demeaned by not only rabbis, the two rabbis in particular, Paul and Akiba, but by billions of people. And it's one thing for Dowd to have made this sacrifice voluntarily. It's another thing entirely for his people to have denied themselves of the benefit of what he did and to discredit Dowd in the process. So that is the question that is being asked here. And that is why it's important that we know what these issues actually entail. So as we go through the rest of this, the next thing we find is that um, God is speaking of a great number of people, uh, adversaries that would be, essentially innumerable, of greater quantity than Dowd has ever seen before. And when you consider those that have sought to discredit Dowd, who would have him dead and buried and therefore of no value, and then have plundered his attributes, his accolades, his achievements, they would be um, the adherents of the most popular religion in human history, and that would be of Christianity. It would also be those who um, formed rabbinic Judaism, because this is what Rabbi Akiva also did. He, rather than acknowledge that it was Dowd who was the Messiah and the Son of God who fulfilled Pesach Matzah B'Kurim in 33 CE, he simply foisted another false Messiah to confront one lie with another lie and deprived Israel of salvation, and in the process led to the diaspora and ultimately to the Holocaust. That's the founder of rabbinic Judaism. So it's God's people are affected by this, and the very rabbis that were conceived by his sleight of hand, well, they became the rabbis that sold Muhammad Talmud stories, which made their way into the Quran and made it possible for Islam not only to exist, but to be sufficiently credible to declare war on all mankind and survive Muhammad's death and do so, focusing on Jews. So there is a lot that can be gleaned from this particular issue. I'm going to touch this keyboard for one moment in the teleprompter and see if there we go. If I can get the text to move again, it has a tendency to lock up. So, excuse me for doing so, but I really wanted to have the opportunity to be able to continue and to bring this to you. Well, unfortunately, I'm unable to get this to move off of slow mode. So, unable to read the text, it appears that I may have to, if I'm not able to perform here, go to plan C, I guess, as to what it would be, and trying to make this all work. And unfortunately, this is quite frustrating, ladies and gentlemen, when you're working with something that is as uh, difficult, really, as well. This might. Oh, there we go. We've got a teleprompter here that's got so that you know what I'm working with. I don't ever want to try to cite Yahweh's testimony just from memory. Uh, I really want to be able to read it, and I want to be able to convey it in an amplified fashion, tell you the words upon which it is based, and so that you're in a much better position to know what God had to say to us. And I think that's seriously important to understanding, and therefore, so that I'm able to look the camera in the eye, I put the text on a mirror in front of a teleprompter here that enables me to read the translations and then feel free to comment on them as is necessary. And that's what I'm attempting to do for you here. Uh, this goes on to say that a great many, and this is why this is important. It means the preponderance of people, and That did not occur at any time in Dode's first life, but it certainly has occurred between the second and third, where the two most popular religions in the world, comprising about 5 billion people, and the Jewish religion have all come against Dode. They have all risen up to take a stand relative to Sar, to confining Dode's importance, to negating Dode's importance. And that's the message of Psalm 3:1. So we are now better informed, if you will, in terms of what Dode was speaking of. And he had, and this is also important, he had a adversary in his first life uh, named Shaul. And Shaul was the people's choice of kings, while Dode was Yahweh's choice. And the Dode felt great envy, or Shaul felt great envy for Dode, and sought essentially to kill him. And while Shaul was never a threat to Dode, not really. The fact of the matter is, there would be another Shaul, one that Yahweh called out through the prophet Shabat 666 years to the day, that the Shaul who became Paul would write his first letter, that's to the Galatians, the first letter that appeared, first actually written document in the history of Christianity. And he called him out by name, Shaul, calling him the plague of death, and went all the way through to describe all of the ploys that Shaul Paul would use to turn his religion against God's people. So there is this connection also in Dode's life between the Shaul in the first life and the second life, the Shaul, that would have been a witness to what Dode did, who deliberately and knowingly, after being possessed by Hasatan, by Saul's own admission, turned against God's people and created this God-forsaken religion of Christianity. And he beguiled many. And so it would not be a stretch to say that the vast majority of people are now opposed to Dode. They are um, willing to allow the religions of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism to improperly rob Dode of his titles, his accolades, his acumen, and his achievements, and to offer them to someone else when it's just grossly inappropriate that they have done so. There's in Christianity, Dode is acknowledged as the boy who killed Goliath, but um, that's about the extent of it. When in Judaism, rabbis don't like Dode very much because, well, he had the relationship with Yahweh that they covet and do not have. And he is the very Messiah that they have chosen not to acknowledge so they can create one in their own image. Therefore, this is all being used to foreshadow a greater foe, another Shaul, if you will, the Shaul of Christianity, who would turn countless billions against everything Dode stood for and had accomplished. It is addressed in Dode's personal anguish when fulfilling Chag Matzah, and of the riotous conditions that he will have to suppress during the time of Jacob's troubles as he returns. This is the adversary behind the great majority, the established and honored, those are exalted as foes, to relegate Dode and his kingdom to the scrap heap of history. The Mizmowr continues in the second statement with these words: the preponderance of people, Rob, again as the basis of rabbi, are saying, of my soul, there is no salvation for him or through him with God. Pause now and consider this, Shelah. No, that's the essence of it, 3:2. Dode knew that he was the only one who was bringing salvation to his people. And salvation is delivered as the word for salvation states, Yasha, by, and this is a derivative of that, Yeshua, by delivering us from our own guilt, from delivering ourselves from the harm we have done to ourselves. And it was Dod's nephesh, his soul, that was the one who provided this gift for us, because after his bashar corporeal body served as the Pesach El on Passover, opening the doorway to life, it was his nephesh soul that carried our guilt into Sheol to deposit it there, never to be seen again, which makes us appear perfect in God's eyes, because our guilt has been removed and taken to a place where it can never be used against us, and therefore we appear perfect. And in a court of law and in God's perspective, he only sees the good in us with all of the bad gone. And this is how Dod served as our Yeshua, our deliverer, the one who delivered us from our own guilt, who provided a rescue for us and ultimately saved us. And yet, he's not acknowledged as such in Christianity, Judaism, or Islam. So they're all saying that there is no salvation through his soul, or with him, or through him with God. And yet, as we now know, the opposite of that is true, and that is the great truth that is being hidden by these words. So we're asked to pause and consider what is the greatest discovery of, I think, of human history. And in this regard, if you go back just 3 years ago, there isn't anyone that would know how to interpret this statement. I had a suspicion 3-4 years ago that Dod served as the Passover lamb, but I did so because it really is fairly obvious. You read the 22nd Mizmowr; it's written of his sacrifice through Roman crucifixion, centuries before Rome existed or crucifixion even existed, and then how he went about in first person fulfilling matzah, leading to Bokurim. The 88th Mizmor is the same thing. That's the essence also of Yeshayah 53. It's the essence of Yeshayah chapter 9. It's the essence of what is conveyed in 2 Samuel 7. And so, with all of this being laid out for us, and for God making such a tremendous ado about his son in the 89th Mizmor, it becomes rather obvious that Dod served in this very special way. But it's hard to acknowledge for a number of reasons. One is the Christian trash of replacement foolology is placed right on top of it, and they claim that their Iesu Christu was the Messiah and the Son of God and their Savior, and they rob Dod of all these accolades that you have to obliterate all of the lies of Christianity before you're even prepared to accept the truth. Now, that's a lot of work. I mean, no one has ever written a book like the 5 volumes that comprise Twistianity to do that, to completely expunge all of the lies of Christianity from our mental slate, so that we're in a position to accept the truth about Dod David. It also requires a keen understanding of the moods that shape the Hebrew verbs that make these declarations. And that is because it isn't until you understand that Dod communicated these Mizmor in a discussion with Yahweh in both first and second person volition, which is to say that they were of like mind in doing this. And so before you can acknowledge that Dod, in fact, was more than just the actual Messiah and the actual Son of God, and that he is the actual returning king, which are profound by themselves, and not acknowledged within Christianity, Judaism, or Islam, you have to go to the next step and say, well, that means that there was no Jesus. That whole story is fictitious from beginning to end. It's nothing but a misnomer and mythical being serving as a crude counterfeit of Dod. Well, then the next step is you've got to figure out why Dod would volunteer for this. Why would he volunteer to be crucified as the Passover lamb? And why would he volunteer to take our guilt into Sheol, to suffer that way? And even beyond that, why would God allow it? And that's the part that takes time to appreciate, because you can't announce this discovery that Dode served as the Passover lamb and that he is our Savior because of what he did on Matzah with his soul, as it acknowledges here, as our Savior, as again it acknowledges here. And do you realize why he would have done so? First of all, how did he figure out that he should volunteer for this? And then why would he bring this upon himself? And then, of course, why did God allow it? Until you can answer those questions, and then you can go through the entire story in the Torah and prophets and ascertain that they all point to this same conclusion, and there is no prophecy or statement that negates it. But you can't make that statement because it's the most profoundly important statement that people can realize. Yeah, Dode is the Savior. Dode fulfilled Pesach Matzah Bekorim in his second of 3 lives in 33 CE, which was year 4000 Yah. And while I've shared this before, the answer is pretty straightforward. Dode, reading the Torah, came to the same conclusion that I have, that Israel is impossible. The children of Israel are obstinate, they're unappreciative, they're belligerent. I've used the term irascible, but that is hardly even does it justice. I mean, they were still in Mitzrayim when Moshe tried to help them and they turned against him. And the moment he gets them out of Mitzrayim, before they even cross the Gulf of Aqaba of the Red Sea, they're already saying, we want to go back, and turned against Moshe even then. And then they get to Mount Choreb, and rather than relishing in their salvation, they're going to be religious again, and they make a golden calf to celebrate the Apis the bull cult that was prominent in Ramses, where they were, making mud bricks. And they get to their first stop along the way, and at their first stop along the way, they're so belligerent. Moshe says, "What in the hell? I can't do this. They're impossible." And he actually starts blaming God for putting him in this situation because the children of Israel were just impossible to lead. They were obnoxious. I mean, it was the children of Israel that told God, "Go away, shut up. We don't want to ever hear from you again." That was before they even left Choreb. So Dode realized that as much of a man of character and conviction as Moshe was, he couldn't lead them. And he realized that in his own experience, where he had defended them successfully 66 times, he had unified Israel, he had brought them in to Israel to Jerusalem as their city. He had recovered the Ark of the Covenant. He had defeated their primary nemesis, which was the Philistines. And he had kept all of their foes at bay. And even after doing all of that, they led an insurrection against him. He just knew that there is no way that this idea that God is promising through the conversation that was filtered through Nathan, chronicled in 2 Samuel 7, that Dode is coming back as the king of forever. And Dode said, here I was a king for this relatively short period of time, and it was just impossible. No, it's just impossible. This job can't be done. And then it dawned on him, well, when you study what happened on Mount Moriah in year 2000 Yah, 1968 BCE, when Abraham and his beloved son Yishak were taken up to Mount Moriah to perform the dress rehearsal for Pesach as a father and son, and Yahweh provided the lamb, Dode figured out it's God's son who should serve as the lamb, honor God's promise. And he realized that if he suffered in this way on this day and then on the next, unleavening our guilt by taking it into Sheol, that his people, those who would be with him for all eternity, would all be there explicitly because of what Dode did. That our lives would be prolonged and our souls perfected, and we adopted into Yahweh's covenant family to live with him under his tutelage, his shepherding, that all of us would be there because of Dod's sacrifice. And so under that scenario, well, he'll be revered and respected forevermore. I mean, how are you going to say, I don't want to listen to the guy that made it possible for me to be here? Without him, I'm not here. So Dod figured it out. 2 days of suffering for an eternity of respect and the ability to actually accomplish this job that Yahweh wanted him to do. So now we know why Dod did it. We know how Dod figured out that he should do it. We know why Dod did it. The only question now is, why did God allow it? Why would he allow his beloved son to suffer in this way? And the answer, again, is that he knew it was in Dod's interest. He knew that by Dod doing this for 2 days, that he gains an eternity of respect. And he knew how that would serve Dod. He also knew that he had made a commitment that he would only work through and communicate through his chosen implements, men like Moshe and Dod, like myself today. And therefore, it was right that a man show the character and compassion to do this. And if there was going to be a man who did it, the right man to do it, the Sadak individual to do it, would be the great Gabor, the most courageous and competent man of God, his beloved Dod. I mean, it's a greater sacrifice actually for Yahweh to allow his son to serve in this way than if it were possible for he himself to do it. And he himself can't do it because God doesn't have a bashar, corporeal body, that God, well, he has a soul, his personality, his consciousness can't go into the place of separation from him. And there's no way for God's nephesh or any part of him to be called the firstborn of him, because he is one. So it needed to be performed by someone, and Dod was the right person at the right time, and Dod volunteered. So this is all of what is being conveyed here, and until you have an appreciation of how all that comes together, and no one did until about 3 years ago, when after some 20 years of translating Yahweh's testimony, thinking about it, writing the 35 books that sit on the shelf at YAHOWAH.com, some of which are over my left shoulder here behind me, no one realized it. It was a discovery that needed to be made, and needed to be made at the right time and told to God's people so that they would know who their Messiah is, and who the Son of God is, and who enabled the covenant, and how he did so, and how to capitalize upon it before it's too late. So this is what we have done. And for those who are Torah observant, for those who have listened to the testimony of the prophets, we know that we're in a position to be called out and welcomed by God, by the one who facilitated our reconciliation into that relationship. It was Dod, who was the Passover lamb. And he was denied this by Paul and Akiba, both men who claimed to be rabbis. And as a result of the religions they founded, most would claim that there was no salvation through Dod's soul, and they would have Dod dead and buried, and they would be wrong. And it would cost 80 generations of Jews, and I guess additional Christians as well, their souls. So now, as we have embarked post this amazing discovery, we have found Yahweh referring to Dod as, his anointed Messiah 3 times because of his 3 lives, as his son 3 times because of his 3 lives, and his chosen king now and forever. He is God's right hand. He is the rightful shepherd. He is our Savior. Through his lyrics and lives of this remarkably, uniquely important, brilliant, and articulate man of God, and of good judgment, and of exemplary character, Yahweh accomplishes all of the things that are necessary for us to be part of his covenant family. Dode will even admit as much in the next two stanzas of this song, so let's commence with them. You, Yahowah, are a shield all around me and my source of deliverance. Before we go on, let's just talk about that for a moment. Dode was volunteering to serve as the Passover lamb and to carry our guilt with his soul into Sheol to deposit it there. So his body was going to be made vulnerable and bludgeoned, but that was disposable. That body was, commenced, uh, restored, if you will, through Yahowah using an element of his DNA to create probably the same body that he would have been in his first life, and that body was something that Dode, I'm sure, did not want to reoccupy because it had been a source of, well, pleasure, but also of great grief, and he knew it would be of great pain in this particular life. But Dode had had 1,000 years in between occupying this body, where his soul was liberated and enhanced and enriched in Yahweh's presence. And so what he wanted protected was his soul. And he needed Yahowah to serve as a shield around his soul, because it was his soul laden with our guilt that was going into the black hole, if you will, of Sheol to carry our guilt away. And it was there that it would have to be protected by this great shield of Yahowah, or it would have been crushed. And so he's attributing a shield that Yahowah provided to keep his soul intact in the great pressures and darkness and enormous gravity of Sheol. So it's a shield all around my source of deliverance, my manifestation of power, my attribution of status. So after Dode's nefesh soul was released from Sheol, what his soul accomplished is the ultimate manifestation of Dode's power. It's his attribution of status. It's his kabod, I should say. It's his value. It's what has caused us who know him to respect him. It is his splendor. It is the glory that he will be adorned in. And it is the means of him enriching us and empowering us. It's his ultimate gift and reward. And it says, and that Yahweh is also the one raising him first and foremost from the beginning. Yes, Dode has been raised by God to a higher status than anyone else, and God knew he was going to do this even as he was creating the universe. The implements of God's choosing and how he would work with them to resolve the failings of man were known to God because he is eternal in time, and because his light energy, he can see our future and our past, and can report it to us. That Dode was known to him, and that Dode's agreement to do this, God was aware of long before it actually happened, and making Dode the first and foremost Rosh from the very beginning. So it was never realistic to believe that Dode was ever in his first life actually concerned for his own safety. I've shared this now on numerous occasions. My relationship with Yahowah is exceedingly good. I bear Yahowah's spirit and have the spirit of boldness, as well as the spirit of wisdom, of understanding, and of knowledge to augment what you are able to discern from these video blogs. And I have successfully survived thousands of death threats over the past 20 years by Muslims for having written Prophet of Doom and now Goddamn Religion. So I know a thing or two about Yahowah protecting those that are committed to being steadfast, loyal, and working with him. And the role that I'm playing, while very significant to God, pales in comparison to that of his son, who was the great prophet, great king, great defender of his people, the unifier of his people, his firstborn, and also the one who fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim. So Dode would never have been concerned of his life. He actually just said that Yahweh is his shield, his protector, and he knew it, protecting his soul from harm's way. So this is all, just part of why we should view this Mizmowr correctly. And I share this because the insurrection perpetrated by Absalom, which the rabbis wanted to attribute this Mizmowr to that, as opposed to the truth that Yahweh would never abandon Dode. That even as Dode made this tremendous sacrifice, his soul was protected by Yahweh. Yeah. And this is important to understand what the context is that this declaration is being issued to celebrate. So Dode held a greater status with Yah than all the rest of us combined, and he would have had no reason to duck ever, causing us to realize that this reference to raising his head from the beginning, first and foremost, and attributing great power and status to him, delivering him, speaks to this very special thing that Dode had volunteered to do, serving as the Pesach El, the Passover lamb, the one unyeasting our souls from the fungus of religion and politics on matzah, and then rising up to God as his firstborn son on Bakurim, firstborn children. So it is Yahweh that delivered Dode's nefesh from Sheol, following the fulfillment of matzah. And during Bakurim, Dode became the Bakor, the firstborn of Yahweh, just as the prophecies attributable to him and the 89th Mizmowr acclaim. So what follows in this next statement is an example of understanding the power of the Hebrew moods, particularly the expression of first and second person volition, as we consider a statement from someone as profoundly important to us as Dode and Yahweh. It says, I communicated audibly, calling out to and summoning. This is Qowl Ani El Kara. Powerful words again, because Qowl is a voice. In this case, the voice was Dode's. Today, and delivering this message to you, the voice is Yada. It is mine. And I am Qowl. I am speaking as the voice of God to his people, to reacquaint them with his name, to reintroduce them to the value and the contributions of his Son, our Messiah, the Son of God, and our Savior. And so I am the voice calling Yisrael to appreciate this raised highway that is being presented on their behalf to bring God's people home at this time. And it's interesting that in this case, it is even lifting them up above Arabia, and therefore among the attacking Muslims that will strive to do them in. Kara, of course, is the basis of Mikra. The Mikra are the 7 annual meetings with God where we're called out of this world and invited into his company. Kara is to read and recite, to invite, to summon, to call out, to meet, and to greet. And therefore, when you speak of the voice of God and include Kara in the statement, you recognize that Yahweh is trying to draw our attention to the Kara, as in the Mikre and Mikra, that his son Dode fulfilled, which provides this source of salvation that Dode was speaking. So this reads, I communicated audibly, calling out to and summoning Yahweh. And he answered me. This is from Anah. Kara is an invitation, and what one does when one receives an invitation from God, if one is informed and rational, is they answer it, they respond. It's called an RSVP. And so God issued the invitation for us to meet with him, and our responsibility is to respond. Now, in this particular case, this is written such that now Dode, because he is performing something so extraordinarily important, is shown calling out to and summoning Yahweh, and it is Yahweh who is responding because, well, Dode is his beloved son, and he was doing something extraordinarily important. And it says, from his set apart mountain. This is where Pesach was not only fulfilled by Dode on Mount Moriah, but it's also where Abraham and Yishak came to provide the dress rehearsal as a harbinger of this fulfillment of Pesach exactly 40 Yobel or 2,000 years prior to this event, the same day of the year in the exact same location. And so this voice that is calling out from Mount Moriah. Pause now and consider the implications of this. Mizmowr Psalm 3:4. So Dode knew where to turn his ear to listen to God, and his summons was answered because long before Dode called out to Yahweh on this day, he had listened to and observed the Torah. He had engaged in the Bereth covenant. He had attended the Mikra, and that is the proper order of things. We must do those things before we speak to God. And in this case, father and son had rehearsed what they knew they would accomplish together 1,000 years in advance of this when Dode wrote the 22nd and 88th Mizmowr and authored this particular psalm that we're considering. They knew what they were going to do, and they realized they could rely upon and trust one another. So what Dode reveals even next clearly did not occur in his uprising against him with Absalom. So helping us recognize this is much more of the reason that we were provided so much detail into Dode's response to the coup, where we told that Dode got all whimpery and cried over the loss of his son, as opposed to celebrating the reunification of the kingdom of Yahweh, which he will once rule over quite soon for all eternity. So, knowing what happened then, we are better able to see this as addressing this much greater event of what occurred during the second and what will occur during the third coming of Dode, when he came to save us and will return to lead us at the conclusion of the summer of 2033. Revived and productive, he will take action as a result of Yahweh sustaining and supporting him, reinvigorating him, so that he can accomplish this mission. And clearly that has to be the reason, because there would be no reason for Dode to have told us in the midst of this powerful third Mizmowr psalm that he did the same thing that we all do almost every night, that he fell asleep and he woke up refreshed and productive the next morning. So there's more to it, and I've shared that with you. He said, I relaxed and I fell asleep, and I will awaken revived and productive. Coots, passing through the summer and the heat of the moment, I am to be roused, feeling alive and refreshed, taking action and bearing fruit in the Hiphil perfect, because Yahweh sustains and supports me, upholds me, steadfastly focusing upon me, such that I can lean on him for whatever is necessary. Called imperfect. Mizmowr lyrics to be sung. Psalm 3:5. So this is what Dode is revealing. He fell asleep 3,000 years ago, but was awakened to serve his people 1,000 years later, most especially during the fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, and Bakorim. And 10 years later, from this, well, actually now it's just 8.5 years from this broadcast of this portion of the third Mizmowr, Dode is going to return. and he is going to be the king of Kippurim and Sukkah and forevermore. So this is Dod's way of saying, and Yahweh's way of saying through Dod, that at the end of his first life, he had a period where he was now going to be revived and restored and enabled so that he could fulfill the responsibilities of his second life, which was to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. And this is exceedingly important for us to recognize that at the end of his first life, Dod did not have the strength, really, to perform at this level. He was worn out, just like Moshe was before him. And this kind of reinvigoration was necessary to put Dod in a position where he could do this. He wanted to do it, but doing it was another thing altogether, and it would need Yahweh to do exactly these very things. So when he returns, we hear, and I will not revere or fear the great multitude of people who from all around have set themselves up against me, have placed and imposed, even established themselves, taking a stand and constituting themselves such they are in my proximity, even over me. Mizmowr lyrics to be sung, Psalm 3:6. So as a consequence of Dod's fulfillment of Chag Matzah, the beast of imperial Rome and that of the Roman Catholic Church would torment and defame him, and have done so for a very long time. And during the time of Yaakov's troubles, a great multitude the world over will come to take their swipe at the chosen people, especially on behalf of doctrines and faiths which are opposed to the expansive and united Yisrael that David represents. All things will come full circle with it becoming as it once was. Dod will be one man against the religious world that has impugned his credibility and has abused his people. And so when Dod returns, don't expect him to respect the religious. He's going to obliterate them. Those who have said that he was dead and buried and who misled his people away from the salvation that he had brought them so that none availed themselves of it, are going to be expunged from the earth. Now, it was Yahweh who enabled the lamb sacrifice, making it applicable as the doorway to life. It was Dod's soul who endured matzah to save us from ourselves. But in this regard, it was Yahweh who provided the shield protecting his soul, even in the constraints of Sheol. And the set-apart spirit was likely dispatched by Yahweh to retrieve Dod from Sheol and carry his soul, Nefesh, back to Shamaim, all of which made the promise of Shabuah, of the 7 Shabat, possible. Similarly, Yahweh inspired and empowered the words Dod wrote, which teach us how to observe the Torah such that it leads to our salvation. The text reads, "Your desire and my will is for you to take a stand. Kum, my choice and your decision is to encourage, to be supportive and establish." This is the call imperative, paragogic, cohortative. Well, that's a mouthful, I realize. But every word of that means something important, because the imperative mood conveys second person volition. Your here is addressing Yahweh. That would be second person. So it's saying in the imperative mood that your will, your desire, your choice, Yahweh, is to take this stand. But it was also written in the cohortative, and the cohortative is an expression of first person volition, which means that the speaker, who is Dod, is saying that your desire and my will your choice and my decision. We are of like mind regarding this taking a stand, to be supportive, to establish in this manner. While the paragogic He underscores the importance of this, expressing the emphasis that this should be understood. So it is your desire and my will for you to take a stand, Yahowah, and you want to liberate and you want to deliver. It is your will to save me and your decision to provide salvation through me. Yasha ani. Yasha is the Hebrew word for to deliver, to remove from harm's way, to liberate, and to save. And it was also written here in the imperative, the Hiphil imperative, which would mean, since God is, or Dode is speaking of God in second person, Dode in first person, speaking of God in second person, is saying that it was the decision of God, it was the choice of God, it was the very will of God to act in such a way that Dode, with the Hiphil stem, became a secondary subject, that Dode acted in this regard, providing salvation as an extension of Yahowah, is what the Hiphil stem adds to this equation, so that Dode could engage as really an understudy, an extension of Yahowah's will to save. And it ends with "My God." Mizmowr lyrics to be sung, Psalm 3:7, and this is just in part. So up to this point, including what we have just read here in the third Mizmowr, and what we will encounter again, Dode is stating very clearly that he and Yahowah were of the same mind, that they had both decided that this is how they would work together, collaborate, if you will, on Pesach Matzon B'Kodem, to deliver eternal life, perfection, and therefore reconciliation in the relationship, and admittance into God's covenant family, and therefore entrance into Shamayim, heaven, forevermore, where we are enriched and empowered by God. They made this decision collaboratively. Their wills and their choices were one and the same. This becomes particularly germane when we move through the Mizmowr and we get to Mizmowr like in the range of 30-ish, where this statement is made again relative to the same choices, again with the same moods, and you finally just realize that God and Dode conveyed that it was their choice and decision, their will to work together in this way to provide salvation, that we must come to grips with and embrace and accept if we're going to capitalize on what they are offering. It is, in my view, the single most sublime of realizations. It's the greatest discovery in all of human history. It is the great gift of God to his people as to what they decided to do on Pesach Matzon B'Kodem. So Dode did what he needed to accomplish, not only to redeem his reputation, but to restore Yisrael, his very people, and so that he could lead them forevermore. And it's what Yahowah wanted. Father and son would take this stand together. They would support one another. And in so doing, Dode, his people, and the covenant family were all reconciled. Dode became the kinsman redeemer, just like his father before him. It is like father and son. It is Yahowah's words which ultimately save us, of course, and the Torah provides the process. Dode enabled it, but it requires them working together to deliver the result. You know, we find salvation, reconciliation, reunion with Yahweh throughout the Torah, and no one conveyed the Torah's purpose in this regard more brilliantly and powerfully than David. And if you don't understand what the Torah is offering, there really is no way to benefit from what David did. So, all of these things must come together. You have to understand Yahweh's relationship with David as his beloved son and as the one through whom he enabled the covenant's promises. You have to understand what those promises are and how they are manifest to deliver the benefits of the covenant through the Moed Mikre, when these things transpired and what they offer us and how we capitalize upon them, and how those things relate to the benefits of the covenant and how we achieve them by accepting the conditions of the covenant, which Dode is the ultimate exemplar. It's all hand in glove. It is all tied together. It is all one story, uh, melding together such that we can deduce our understanding of it through how all of these details shape this beautiful portrait of God's love for his beloved son and of his son representing the covenant family, and of collectively them offering us the opportunity to be part of it, all of which is conveyed through this marvelous Mizmowr, and one where if we can just make the truth behind all of this available to God's people, such that they appreciate what Yahweh and Dode have achieved, what they're offering, that the world will be so very different for them, that there'll be so many more of them who capitalize upon this and join us during the Shavua harvest, and who are gleaned again on the Towrah, Lakat, and more still who are prepared to be part of the great homecoming and family reunion as a result of the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah, and are there looking up to Yahweh along with the one, his beloved son, who was pierced, so that we become family again. And we're prepared to camp out with Yahweh during the celebration of Sukkah here on earth for 1,000 years as it's restored to the Garden of Eden, and we're allowed re-entry into this place of great joy. That is what Father and Son are offering. And it's why Yahweh has asked me to Qowl, voice this message to you. So I thank you for listening to this, the third episode of part 3 of our review of the third Mizmowr as part of Coming Home Qowl, AVoice. Thank you again. I am Yada, Craig Winn, and this has been the YAHOWAH blog.